Benny's right there.
Say, Ben,
I'd like to call to order regular meeting of the Ascension Parish Council, July 20th, 2017. Please stand for the prayer and the pledge. The prayer will be led by Councilman Randy Cluot.
In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Dear Lord, we thank you for this day. Lord, we're blessed to be living here in the United States of America, where we can deliberate and we can judge and we can steer our own future. Lord, we ask that you look upon the elderly in this severe heat. And we ask that everyone look to their neighbors and make sure that everyone's all right. Lord, it's with a heavy heart that we ask you to look upon the Cullen family for the loss of Patrick, Mike Cullen, brother of past council member Dennis Cullen. Mike was a wonderful human being that enjoyed life and enjoyed giving back to others and doing work. He worked tirelessly through the flood of last August and continued. His unexpected death is a severe strike to his family, and we ask that you put your hand upon them and bring them through this. We ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, Madam Secretary, we have Councilman John Cagnolati and Councilman Todd Lambert absent tonight. All others are here. We have no chair additions. I just wanted to, for you guys that are regular here, we have a little change in the speaker card. So we have red if you're in favor of something and green if you're, red if you're opposed, green if you're in favor. But just grab a card if you want to speak on an item and turn it into sentiment. Presentations. The first one we have tonight is a proclamation to proclaim Small Business Power Week in Ascension Parish. We have Mr. Ken Dawson and Ascension Economic Development Corporation. Kate, Lisa.
Thursday, come on up. We will read this proclamation. You know, small business is the backbone of our economy, and what they do is definitely appreciated. And we thank all of you for what you do. This is a parish proclamation for the Parish of Ascension. Whereas the purpose of Small Business Power Week is to create a collaborative program where entrepreneurs in Ascension Parish can learn about programs, services, associations, and networks available as resources to their small business. And whereas the Small Business Power Week would give small business owners the opportunity to learn from expert service providers to network with local businesses and industry leaders. And whereas the Small Business Power Week would serve as a launching pad to strengthen existing small businesses and to grow new small businesses to support the growth of a strong small business ecosystem in Ascension Parish. And whereas the partners of the Collaborative of Small Business Week partners include the Ascension Economic Development Corporation, Micro Business Enterprise Corporation of Ascension, SCORE, SBA, Ascension Chamber of Commerce, True Fund, Sela Women Business Group, the Donaldsonville Area Chamber of Commerce, Parish of Ascension, City of Donaldsonville, City of Gonzales, Town of Sorrento, and the Louisiana Department of Economic Development. Now, therefore, on behalf of Kenny Matassa, President of the Parish of Ascension, State of Louisiana, by virtue of the authority invested in me, do proclaim August 12th through 19th, 2017 as Small Business Power Week in Ascension Parish, and encourage all businesses and all those people wanting to start businesses to actively participate. We thank you for all that you do and continue to do. Being a small business owner at one time myself, I know that it's a lot of work, and all the help we can get is important. So thank you. Thing like that.
We thank you for this and appreciate your support. And we have Lee Malance on tonight, who's really spearheaded this effort for us. So we want him to say a few words.
Thank you. This is our third year to do Small Business Power Week, and I know many of you participated before. We're excited. We've grown this year. We're adding a Superwoman's Conference on August the 12th, which has all been promoted to promote women business owners, and a few extra dates will be in all the municipalities, including other locations in the parish. So we encourage you guys to visit. Also, this week marks the grand opening of the Micro Business Enterprise Corporation of Ascension's incubator, which will be out at Lamar Dixon. So we have a small business incubator that's opening to help small businesses as a launching pad. MBECA was also awarded the opportunity to do the Small Business CEO Roundtable program, which is another free opportunity for second stage businesses. So we're growing and we're excited about it, and we hope to see you guys at one of our events. Thank you for letting us present tonight.
Thank you.
Let's take a, let's stand over there, take a photograph.
I love these small groups.
You stand, y'all stand there.
Okay. Thank you, Lee, Kate, and Lisa. Ken, are you going to do the parish president's report, or are we going to have no parish president report tonight? Okay, item number 7, the consent agenda. A contract with Damian Johnson, permanent night security guard at Mental Health, not to exceed $8,000. B, renewal of professional services contract between Ascension Parish Government and Dr. Matthew Gamble for psychiatric services for inmates at the Ascension Parish Jail, $2,000 per month. Item C, agreement between Acadian Total Security LLC and Ascension Parish Government for GPS monitoring services, $4,119.65 per month, $49,435.80 yearly. Item D, change order number 001 for the St. Landry Edenbourne Connector, project number 14-023, increase of $115,139.60, and an additional 5 days. Item E, change order number 002, CWEF project, installation of chloramine booster stations, Palo Alto and Lemonville, to add $26,595 and 377 days. Item F, request for quote, general engineering and technical support services, PM-17-020.0, GSA Consulting Engineers, Buchard Horn, Hartman Engineering. Item G, bid items to accept the lowest responsive bid. Recommendation number 1, TAPCO, object markers R&L, men working bridge out, green post 6.5 feet by 7 feet, adjustable cross bracket with 5.5 inch by 12 inch slot, Vulcan signs, fresh oil, flagger, mowing ahead bracket, 91 UFOL cross bracket with 12 inch by 24 inch slot, bracket cap with 3.5 inch slot, traffic control, bolt, nut, washer set, A-frame, barricade, bracket cap with 12 inch slot, Osborne Associates, all other signs and supplies. 2, blinker sign, flashing LED stop sign, and anti-vandal warning kit. Traffic and Parking Control Company, TAPCO, $1,025. Item 3, 3M Street Road Name Signs, Traffic Control Product. Item H, request for qualifications, professional engineering design, and related services in support of Move Ascension. Project number ENG-17-100 to accept the top 10 ranked by the Engineering Selection Committee. Shred Kirkendall and Associates, Evans Grave Engineers, T. Baker Smith, SJB Group LLC, Meyer Engineers, Hartman Engineering, Burke Kleinpeter Inc., Buchard Horn, Neil Schaefer, GSA, and Boker. Item I, roads for acceptance into the parish maintenance system, Parker Place subdivision, second filing, Fenway Avenue, 1,736 feet, Manitoba Drive, 164 feet. Item J, change order number 5, Lamar Dixon Soccer Field, days only. Item K, change order number 6, Lamar Dixon Soccer Fields, days only. Item L, change order number 7, Lamar Dixon Soccer Field, days only. Item M, change order number 8, Lamar Dixon Soccer Field, days only. Item N, change order number 9, Lamar Dixon Soccer Field, days only. Item O, contract extension, quality engineering, days only for Lamar Dixon Soccer Fields. Does anybody wish to remove anything from the consent agenda? Hearing none. Any discussion? Any opposition to the consent agenda? Hearing none. Consent agenda is adopted.
No, I'm just gonna make a motion.
Need a motion and a second,
Motion.
Mr. Chairman.
Sorry. Got ahead of. And a motion by Councilman Kluot, second by Councilman Satterley. Now, any discussion, any opposition? Consent agenda is adopted. Have item number 8, the Finance Committee recommendations. This is a request for proposal, Enterprise Services Planning, ERP Software and Implementation Services, Tyler Technologies, Inc. We have Brandon here Brandon O'Day, to answer any questions or anyone may have. Ms. Casso.
Brandon, I just want to thank you for the effective presentation that you and your team did at the Finance Committee meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
You pulled it together, and we appreciate that very, very much.
It's been a lot of work. Thank you.
I know it has.
Any other questions for Mr. O'Day? Okay, so in this case, we have looking for a motion. If we're going to adopt the recommendations from the Finance Committee, the motion would be to adopt the Finance Committee recommendation and a motion to include the change management consulting solution in the amount of $50,000 and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this service.
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Councilwoman Casso, second by Councilman Johnson. Have a discussion or question?
Yes. And as before,
Councilman
my
Joseph.
concern is that I'm not in agreement because of one source, one contract, one bidding person on this here. And I oppose it because of that reason. Other than that, we desperately need it. And as usual, your department need it and finance need it.
Any other discussion, any other questions? Madam Secretary, we have one in opposition. To do a roll call, please.
Councilman Joseph.
No.
Chairman Dawson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilman Satterley.
Mr. Chairman, we're voting only on Part A of this item?
That's correct.
Yes.
Councilman Dempsey Lambert.
Yes.
Councilman Kluot.
Yes.
Councilman Lawler.
Yes.
Councilwoman Casso.
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
Motion is adopted. Thank you, Ms. O'Day.
Thank you.
We have item B, which is amendment number 2 to master contract for professional services between SSA Consultants and the Parish of Ascension. Renewal of original agreement for the additional year through June 20th, 2018 to include Exhibit C with an additional scope of work for an additional amount of $40,000.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Ms. Casso, second by Mr. Joseph. Any discussion? Any questions? Mr. Satterley.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was against this item in Finance Committee for the reasons stated. I'd just like to reiterate them here again before we vote this evening. This is nothing against SSA, who I indicated then and will again tonight. Did, I think, a fine job in doing this Phase 2 efficiency and effectiveness study. However, if I had my druthers, I'd much rather have seen their final narrative report, which has been promised to us more than once and is yet to be delivered, so that I could, so to speak, judge those goods before authorizing another payment of $40,000 for additional study. And so for that reason alone, Mr. Chairman, I won't be able to support this evening and would ask for a roll call vote.
Any further discussion? Okay, so we have some opposition. Madam Secretary, roll call, please.
You have a speaker. You want to?
Well, it's really, this is past the time to speak.
Councilman Joseph.
Yes.
Whoa.
Chairman Dawson.
You're not going to let the public speak?
No.
How can you do that, man?
Well, when we usually do it when we start the item.
Well, you should have.
I'm sorry, Chairman.
We
He
just
turned
got-
it in. I
Oh, I'm
forgot to
sorry.
give it to you.
Okay, I thought it was just turning. Okay, Mr. Pettit. Mr. Jeff Pettit. on item 8B.
Thank you. And that clock is not my friend again, but real short and sweet. I did turn it in on time.
Okay, sorry.
And that's okay. Things happen. I understand that. My question is, when is the final narrative that we've been promised by Dr. Slaughter from SSA going to be presented to this council publicly so that we can all see it? It's been promised for over 2 months. So I don't understand the delay. My other question is this, and I've asked this before. How much money have we paid to SSA? Can anybody answer that?
Well, legal. Legal.
I have no clue.
No, that's not the question. We normally don't respond back to a question like
This is a public
that.
comment section. This is
That's
not a
right.
question.
Okay, that's what the legal question I wanted to ask.
Yes, this is
Okay.
a public comment section.
Okay, I'm sorry. Sorry, O'Day. But I would like to know at some point, and if I have to do a public records request, I will, and that's probably the proper way to do it. And I'll do that. But I'd like to know how much public dollars have been spent on this, but y'all can answer, what is the reason for the delay in getting the report? I stood at this podium before, over almost 2 months ago, and Dr. Slaughter was sitting right here with her team, and they gave their presentation, and I turned and asked her while I was here in the public comment period, y'all remember that, and I asked her, is the final narrative going to be delivered? And she said, next week. That's 7 weeks ago. So, where is it? That's all I'm asking.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Peck. So I think we were at the stage of a roll call vote. Did you have any further discussion? Okay, Madam
Councilman
Secretary.
Joseph,
Yes?
Chairman Dawson,
Yes.
Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilman Satterley,
No.
Councilman Dempsey Lambert,
Yes.
Councilman Kluat,
Yes.
Councilman Lawler,
Yes.
Councilwoman Casso,
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
Amendment is adopted. Item number 9, Personnel Committee recommendations, and we have Chairman Benny Johnson to give those.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Personnel Committee met on July the 12th, conducted interviews for the following boards: Ascension Hospital, Waterways Commission, the Library Board, Tourism Commission, Economic Development Corporation, and ACUD1. Committee would like to make the following recommendations. For the West Ascension Hospital Service District Board, a new appointment, Mr. Marvin Grove.
Motion to approve.
Have a motion by Ms. Casso, second by Mr. Joseph. Any discussion? Any opposition?
Waterways Commission, a new appointment, Ms. Gina Landry.
Motion?
Second.
Motion by Councilman Joseph, second by Ms. Casso. Any discussion? Any opposition?
Reappointment of Ms. Deanna Miles.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Lambert, second by Mr. Kluat. Any discussion? Any opposition?
Reappointment of Mr. Thomas Scott.
Motion?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Casso. Any discussion? Any opposition?
Appointment of Mr. Will Rieger.
Motion?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Casso. Any discussion? Any opposition?
Reappointment of Mr. John Tompley.
Motion.
A motion by Mr. Kluat, second by Mr. Lambert. Any discussion? Any opposition?
And a reappointment of Mr. Ronald Bro.
So move.
Motion by Mr. Lambert, second by Mr. Kluat. Any discussion? Any opposition?
Moving on to the Library Board, a reappointment of Ms. Sandy Scallon.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Cluett, second by Ms. Casso. Any discussion, any opposition?
Moving to the Tourism Commission, new appointment of Mr. Jean St. Germain.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Casso. Any discussion, any opposition? Motion carries.
New appointment of Mr. Al Schaff.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Cluett, second by Mr. Joseph. Any discussion, any opposition?
New appointment of Mr. Craig Walling.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Casso. Any discussion, any opposition?
And a reappointment of Ms. Glenda Shaheen.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Cluett, second by Ms. Casso. Any discussion, any opposition?
Moving on to the Economic Development Corporation, a reappointment of Mr. Donald Hanna.
Motion.
Second.
A motion by Mr. Cluett, second by Mr. Lambert. Any discussion, any opposition?
Reappointment of Mr. Roger Keese.
Motion.
Second.
A motion by Ms. Casso, second by Mr. Joseph. Any discussion, any opposition?
And last but not least, ACUD number 1 board, Mr. Tom Cancian.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Joseph, second by Ms. Casso. Any discussion, any opposition? Motion is adopted.
That concludes our committee's report.
Thank you very much, Councilman Johnson. General business, item number 10, request for quote demolition of one single-family residence located at 44400 Highway 42, Prairieville. Approval to accept lowest responsive quote from Land Services LLC and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this service. Darrell and Berthelot.
Well, you just read my report for me, and I appreciate it.
Okay.
Second.
Got a motion by Mr. Lambert, second by Mr. Sadley. Any questions, any discussion, any opposition? Mr. Joseph.
For this demolition, did it come to the full council for a vote on that? I don't recall this ever coming just for it to be demolition. I know, they normally come to us. I mean, I know it's a bid to be torn down, but I just don't recall this. We ever?
Just the process of the money.
All right. Okay.
Further questions, further discussion, any opposition? Motion's adopted. Thank you, Darrell. Item number 11, fiscal year 2017 flood mitigation assistance grant approval to apply and to authorize Parish President Kenny Matassa to sign and execute all documents pertaining to this application and/or Ms. Gwen LeBlanc, CFO, for financial documents.
Motion.
Martha Collins.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Cluett, second by Councilman Satterley. Any discussion, any questions, any opposition? Now hearing none. Thank you, Ms. Collins.
Thank you. Got another one.
You got another one. Item number 12, fiscal year 2017 pre-disaster mitigation grant approval to apply and to authorize the parish president Kenny Matassa to sign and execute all documents pertaining to this application and/or Ms. Gwen LeBlanc, CFO, for financial documents.
Motion.
Motion by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Cluett. Any questions, any discussion? Mr.
Just a
Cluett.
quick discussion. I would like Ms. Collins just let everybody know that this is normally what we do here.
Yes, sir. This is the first time we've gone out for a national competitive on this because the funds usually come directly from FEMA to the state and then us. So we thought since there was such a big need in the parish, that we would go out and try and get some additional funds to offset the funding that will be coming down. I believe you might have read that we got $33 million out of FEMA. So this is just a way of making this a little bit more palatable and try and see if we can get some funds in another direction.
Thank you.
Further questions, further discussion? Any opposition? Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Collins.
Mr. Chairman.
Item number 13, approval of substantial completion Lamar-Dixon Soccer Complex, project number 2015.001. Ms. Amy Johnson.
Good evening. We're there. The fields are
growing in, of course, I think before you have the substantial completion certificate, as well as the punch list items that we expect to finish in the next couple of weeks, barring Mother Nature, getting in our way with rain again for another month. So we're asking that you please allow us to grant substantial completion at this time for the soccer
Motion to
fields.
approve with congratulations.
Those are items not completed.
Okay.
So maybe just ask them,
Yeah, I'll let her just.
Councilman Lawler has a question.
Yes,
On
sir.
the substantial completion punch list, we have, 14 items that are incomplete. Is that what that's showing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we know when those will be completed? Or?
My anticipation is that, as long as it doesn't rain, that's
Okay.
a lot of these things have to do with it stayed so wet for the past month for most of June, middle of June and early July. The equipment couldn't get out there to finish out the fine grading. They couldn't do the seeding. There's just a lot of that kind of stuff that we would tear up the drainage if we got out there with any equipment to do, so.
And I was just making sure I was reading it right, because I didn't want it to be a situation of, we just forgot to mark that it was completed, it was actually done, just make sure the paperwork's right. It's all
No,
good.
sir, and that's why part of what I've started to include with the certificate is this punch list that you see it. The way I've laid it out is that we'll go through and actually have to sign it, and I won't sign this and submit it to legal as done until all these items are actually checked off, so.
Councilman Kluat.
Yeah, Amy, usually there is a time frame, 45 days.
Yeah,
It's on
the normal
time frame,
45
And then they would
days.
ask for more days based on weather, so.
But right now, it's
This is all
45
They will
days.
approve the weather.
And
Yeah,
so,
we anticipate most of this to actually be done. They actually were able to make some of this happen in the last couple of days, so, yes, sir.
Very good, thanks.
Further questions, further discussion? Councilman Satterlee.
Yeah, I just have a question about, follow-up from Mr. Lawler. Of the number 14 list, continued turf establishment and maintenance. I'm not concerned even about field markings. It's not going to be something done right away. I personally just experienced what may be the loss of around $3,000, $4,000 for sod at a private property that I own for lack of rain. So, there's no way we're going to make this final if we're not happy with this. There's a lot of turf out there with 8 soccer fields, right?
Yes, sir. What we have right now is the growth is establishing itself.
So it's been seeded maybe once or twice? Or?
Actually, it's a different technique where they more or less take the sod, they cut it up, and they turn it into the layer
Right.
with some organics that help it grow.
Right.
We've got a good growth over all the fields right now. We have a few spots where are close to drains that have not quite as much sand. They're not on the play area. They're in the off-play area, I guess. And it's a little rock closer to. They're having a more time. We put some sod around those areas. Right now, we don't really anticipate anything. As a matter of fact, one of the line items that we have is to do some top dressing, and we're even considering holding that because we may not even need it before soccer actually starts, and we may be able to just use it with the subcontractor at some point during the fall. So we've got good drainage. That was, of course, part of the cost, is that we put irrigation in, so it drains. If you go out there and it's rained very hard, all around the fields may be wet, but those fields have little to no water except for the lower end, and it's near a catch basin, but it's not on the fields themselves.
And so, Amy, this is something that we're going to in-house be looking at on all 14 of them in terms of satisfaction of the punch list. I mean, this isn't something we're paying Quality to do.
No, well, they are our engineer of record. They are part of our construction administration team, yes, sir. The team that we actually have, the subcontractor, that's our sports turf, this is what they do for a living, is put these types of fields in.
And the reason I asked that is in addition to what Mr. Lawler said about not having any dates, that the punch list of the 14 has 2 columns. It says assignment, so I don't know who the task is assigned to.
Because we've had, this is all the contractor's responsibility. Generally, what happens is I've had a few projects where there's some things that, there was something we needed to do so that the contractor could finish something, and that's when I've assigned it to us so they would know individually we might have had some part to get something done. But no, sir, this is all the contractor, all of
Just
this
as long as
is-
we don't pay until,
No,
until
sir,
we
and
absolutely
that's what the,
certain.
yes, sir,
I've-
that's,
in my life, I've had so many times, I'm sure everybody in this audience has experienced this, everybody, where you do a major painting or renovation of your home or whatever, and you pay, and once the contractor has the money, and you say, well, this, you drip paint all over here, you did this, whatever, they don't want to come back and do that. So I just want to be sure that
no, sir, and I'll just to make you feel more comfortable, we actually have 2 in-house procedures that kind of our redundancy check. Finance will send the final invoice to me and make sure that all this is taken care of, and I won't approve that invoice. And the second redundancy is before legal will actually go and file the clear lien, legal will contact me and make sure, is it okay to release it? So at that 45-day mark, we have two kind of checks that make sure nobody's signing or approving or sending that retainage money, which on a very large project is quite a bit of money that we've held out of every submitted pay application. The retainage is what's held for the 45 days and not released until that point. So we do still have that final signature. They won't receive that check until these things are done. So we will do our due diligence. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Cluett. Yeah, real quick. Amy generally, and you may have it in here, but when it comes to landscape and sodding, that there's some type of substantial warranty on it past the construction date. I've had landscape that had 1-year warranties on them, you know, and
Yes, sir. I apologize. I can't recall that right off the top of my
I believe
head.
there's probably something there.
But I can tell you, we did have a discussion early on because we were starting the project a little later. We were worried about the time of the year and what we might have to adjust to get a good growth on the fields. I know we reviewed that with our in-house folks, and everybody was very comfortable. And I apologize that I cannot recall that off the top of my head right now. But I can certainly get it and distribute it to you all tomorrow if you'd like.
Further questions, discussion? Any opposition? Not motion carries. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Item number 14, resolution for ratification of President's appointments of Chief Administrative Officer, Parish Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, Director of Public Works, and Director of Department of Planning and Development. The resolution on the 20th day of July 2017, a motion was made by blank and seconded by blank. There being a quorum present from an affirmative vote taken by the members of the Ascension Parish Council, be it resolved that pursuant to the Ascension Parish Home Rule Charter, that the Parish President has appointed the following individuals to the positions as required as follows: Chief Administrative Officer Kenneth Dawson, Parish Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer Gwen LeBlanc, Director of Public Works William Rue, Director of the Department of Planning and Development Jerome Fournier. Be it further resolved that the Ascension Parish Council hereby ratifies the appointment of Kenneth Dawson as Chief Administrative Officer, and be it further resolved that the Ascension Parish Council hereby ratifies the appointment of Gwen LeBlanc as Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer, and be it further resolved that the Ascension Parish Council hereby ratifies the appointment of William Rue as Director of Public Works, and be it further resolved the Ascension Parish Council hereby ratifies the appointment of Jerome Fournier as Director of Department of Planning and Development. This resolution was duly adopted by Ascension Parish Council on this day of 2017. So we're going to break this up by paragraph, and each person will have an individual vote, and we'll begin with Chief Administrative Officer Kenneth Dawson.
Motion.
A motion by Councilman Cluett, second by Ms. Casso. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition? Motion carries. Number 2, Parish Treasurer, Chief Financial Officer Gwen LeBlanc.
Motion.
Motion by Councilman Joseph, second by Councilman Cluett. Any discussion? Any opposition? Hearing none. Motion is adopted. Number 3, Director of Public Works William Rue. Motion by Mr. Lambert. Second by Mr. Cluett. Any discussion? Have discussion. Mr. Satterley.
Yes, before I make my comments, I would like to know, and I guess it's okay to say now, I was one of the ones that asked for a job description and resumes and what have you on the individuals to be ratified tonight, and I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for seeing that we had the same in our packets. In the job description of Mr. Rue, I noticed it was revised February 5th, 2007, having a previous approval date of August 11th, 2005. So is it correct interpretation, Mr. Chairman, that that's the last time this job description was edited in any meaningful way? Because Mr. Rue's title is Director of Public Works, but the description in here, after we amalgamated Public Works with transportation, with drainage, et cetera, would encompass a whole lot more duties and responsibilities, supervisory responsibilities, and all the different categories here. qualifications and everything to be sort of the, I don't like the word czar that I see in the media necessarily, but sort of like the person that's head of just of all things. Do we have a more recent job description in 2007?
I presume that this is the most recent job description, since this is what the administration put in here. I think relative to that is that even though he may hold different job descriptions, this is the one that's called for in the charter to be ratified. So we're ratifying his position as Director of Public Works, not these other titles that he also holds.
Oh, okay, so we're ratifying someone for not necessarily for what they do, but for what their title is. Is that? Let me just go ahead and make my comments then, because I'd like to go on the record tonight to state that I like Mr. Bill Rue. I believe we have a workable and amicable relationship. I want him and everyone else in this courtroom tonight to know that my vote tonight, when I make it, has nothing to do with any personal feelings about Bill, but it has everything to do with job performance issues. Amongst a few other things, I have three major problems tonight with ratifying Mr. Bill Rue. One is his broken promise to this council, made right after the great storm of August 2016, as it's been dubbed by many, that he personally, not a hired gun outside engineering firm, was going to identify the locations of floodplains in Ascension Parish and to bring us a recommendation to this council of no fill in these areas once that task was achieved. This remains a promise that's yet unfulfilled, as we learned most recently when Mr. Rue attempted to hire, primarily without council's full knowledge or blessing, HNTB, that's an engineering firm, to do a floodplain management study that will eventually and hopefully, after considerable and what I believe is going to be an unnecessary further delay, result in a floodplain management ordinance. This study and ordinance should have been realized by now, as was originally promised. Number two, it's a fact that by Bill's own admission, Ascension Parish is a whopping 2 years behind in parish-wide work orders for cleaning out ditches. This is unacceptable. And while multiple factors are likely involved in how this debacle came about, I believe our former drainage director and current director of DPW, whatever title we're going to put on this tonight, bears a substantial amount of responsibility for this negligence. Number three, Mr. Rue's unfulfilled promise and later recanting of a boast in public that he would, quote, save the parish $4 million, unquote, from increased efficiencies associated with the administration's amalgamation, as I mentioned earlier, of drainage, transportation, DPW et al., when he was made head of essentially almost everything that provides services in Ascension Parish. I distinctly recall feeling back then, when this promise was made in public, that it was borderline folly, insanity, that the burdens, various expertises that would be needed, whether or not there's enough time in a day, etc., for any one man to handle all this job responsibility was beyond my abilities to buy in. So in summary, while I believe Mr. Rue is a very, and I emphasize this, very good man and good conscience, Mr. Chairman, I simply cannot support him tonight.
Any further discussion? Any further comments? So we have, I assume we have opposition. Madam Secretary, roll call.
Councilman Joseph.
Yes.
Chairman Dawson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilman Satterley.
No.
Councilman Dempsey Lambert.
Yes.
Councilman Kluat.
Yes.
Councilman Lawler.
No.
Councilwoman Casso.
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
2 nays.
2 nays. The appointment is adopted. Item number 4, Director of Department of Planning and Development, Jerome Fournier.
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Kluat, second by Mr. Joseph. Any discussion? Any opposition? Hearing none, that appointment is adopted. And we're going to need to adopt the resolution as written, so the resolution as a whole. We have a motion by Mr. Cluott, second by Mr. Lambert. Any discussion? Any opposition?
No opposition, Mr. Chairman, but if that resolution, as it's amended, will reflect the voting of the individuals.
The minutes will reflect the voting.
Yep. The resolution will. The minutes or the resolution?
The minutes will reflect the voting on the individuals, and then the minutes will also reflect the voting on the resolution, the entire resolution. So we took this by parts.
Okay, yeah, I understand. I'm just getting a point of clarity here. I'm not trying to make your job any more difficult, Bill, than it is. Thank you.
So now, do we have, on the entire resolution as amended, which it is really not amended? All right, is there any opposition? Hearing none, resolution is adopted. We have item number 15. We have several speakers on this item tonight. First, card on the top, Ms. Catherine Gopal.
Good evening, Council. As an Ascension Parish Council member, one of your most important responsibilities is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the people in our parish. With the hearing of this appeal, after your abolition of the appeals board, you will finally have opportunity to shoulder that responsibility. Thank you for taking your oath of office seriously. 3 questions will be answered tonight with one vote. Number 1, will this council uphold the law? The Unified Development Code is the law related to development in Ascension. In Appendix 3, page 4, the first guiding principle for development relates to public safety and property values. Will additional development in this location jeopardize the safety of Ascension citizens? Page 5 cites the second guiding principle in our law as encourage growth only in areas where the parish can support it with adequate soil, drainage, and physical infrastructure. Can the infrastructure withstand the increased traffic alone? Will politics rule over principle? Number 2, will this council support the decision of those who are appointed by them and trained to make decisions related to development? Both the Planning Commission and this council denied the proposed development. How many of you on this council have had the Capital Region Planning Commission training required of all P&Z commissioners? I can think of only one of 11. Will you trust those who have been appointed by you and have thoroughly vetted the project and denied the development? You have willingly delayed the solution to addressing traffic impact studies. Traffic impact studies remain not worth the paper they're written on. The third lane on Highway 73, sorry, that's something else. Will this council, number 3, will this council allow legal bullies to intimidate and manipulate their vote to create a legal loophole? The developer, Quality Engineering, has previously been cited on 16 violations of their professional license. The presentation and size of this appeal package appears to be a legal brief, signaling that the developer will not take no for an answer. Yes, the developer is free to take this council to court and challenge the parish law, but the tenor of his introductory letter expresses disregard for present law, this council, and the Planning and Zoning Commission. A vote to deny this appeal is well documented. Follow present law, respect the decisions of those who are more knowledgeable than you, and send a message to developers that bullies can do business elsewhere. Thank you. I'd like to place these in the record of the meeting. Thank you.
Next speaker is Samantha Shin.
Councilman, you're going to allow the speakers before they allow the presentation?
We'll do the presentation after the speakers.
Okay.
That's the developer, I guess.
Good evening. I'd like to speak on the traffic and the drainage issues. The traffic impact, I'm still very unclear about how that decision was made. They're proposing 32 homes with a minimum or peak hour effect of 38 trips a day. 32 homes, 1 to 2 trips a day. I mean, if you leave, you got to come back, right? So that's at least in and out, too. So I want to know how it's feasible to only suggest only 6 more trips are estimated during the peak hours. Most homes have 1 to 2 vehicles, regardless if it's a single-parent home. They may have a teenager, or they've got someone coming to the house to help them. Or it's parents that are together and they're driving, or young couple. Or it's parents like mine a few years back when I was a teenage driver. So that's 3 cars per house. So I'm unsure also where the threshold for 100 vehicles for a full impact study comes from. This standard may have been acceptable 5 to 10 years ago when the parish was smaller. I don't think it's an acceptable number now. Also, nearby subdivisions being developed. So I would think it should add to the impacts. Eagles Landing will soon begin the additional 2 phases that they haven't even built yet. Those are also approved for fill on the new lots, additional fill, which also, that leads into the drainage issues. I believe there's valid concerns for the parish being able to uphold their ability to upkeep the ditches. At the hearing for the preliminary plat to be approved or not, the question was posed if the parish agreed to upkeep it, would I have more comfort in being an adjacent property owner? My answer is no. It's not a possibility because the parish is already 2 years behind. That's a known fact. So the only thing that would possibly sway my decision on beginning to support and be okay with this subdivision is if the home was not a slab. Allowing a free way for water to somewhat pass through still where it does. It's a drainage ditch. That whole area is a drainage ditch, a large drainage ditch. So if the homes were built off the ground, impact it less. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
For your time.
Next, we have Jackie Laudendine, and I may be mispronouncing this, Fields Court.
It's close. It's Lauren Dean.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you all. In regards to the subdivision, the alleged proposed subdivision on Highway 42, I have been trying to figure out where the rocket science is here. I'm not seeing it. We cannot handle what we have. People who flooded, who have never flooded, were devastated. Where's the rocket science? You all have the authority to make sure this stops. You all were entrusted to protect us. It's not happening. Send the developers away. We have enough. Our infrastructure, our crime, traffic, the whole 9 yards. You all are charged with that. It's what your job is. Collectively, it's not working. It's not working from you guys and ladies. I spoke with Dempsey yesterday. He assured me he was going to vote against this subdivision. I take him at his word. I hope everyone does. If we need to change verbiage on the ordinance to not allow these loopholes that these guys can get through and pretty much decimate us. Because those who didn't flood this time are going down next time. If this building continues, it's y'all's job to make sure this doesn't happen. I hope y'all do the right thing. I hope y'all vote it down. 32 more houses. This is what really got me when somebody said that this project is not going to make it worse. It's not going to make it worse. Does anybody really believe that? Any of you all or anybody back there really believe this project is not going to do harm to existing residents? If anybody believes that, I'd love to hear it. I don't care what their study is. I don't care who studied it. Those can all be slighted one way or another. I've never been a fan of statistics or studies. The developer, an out-of-town not out-of-town, out-of-parish developer, it's ridiculous. Do the right thing, protect your people, because we go to the voting booths real soon. It's no rocket science.
Thank you. Nicole Gotro.
Hello. So I am here to speak on behalf of my neighborhood, 12 Oaks, and a few of the neighborhoods surrounding us. So we've got 12 Oaks, Greystone, Autumn Woods, Simpson Road, and Diaz Road. So my home flooded during the flood of August. On August 14th, we had to leave our home because the water came up very quickly. Luckily, we had someone in our subdivision that had a drone. So I don't know if there's any way I can present these pictures.
You can put that on the overhead projector. There you go.
Okay, so I don't know if I can zoom in more. Where I have that circled at top, you can't really see it because of the glare, but it is flooded. That is Hudson Cove. It is completely underwater. Here's another picture of a truck completely submerged at the entrance of where they want to put Hudson Cove. So you tell me, where is this water going to go? I'm sorry, I don't have the patience nor the time to deal with a flooded home again. I was one of the lucky ones in my neighborhood who only got 6 inches. So when it comes to where's this water going to go, next time they're going to have to build this land up. So when they build this land, they can speak of detention ponds and retention ponds. Those ponds are going to have to be higher too. Homes are going to have to be higher. So when it floods again, if it floods, where's that water going to go? It's going to go into Greystone. It's going to go even more into Autumn Woods, even more. Rather than having 50% of our neighborhood flooded, 12 Oaks is going to be completely underwater. Then it's going to go into Eagles Landing as well. Not only do we have flooding issues like everybody spoke about before, traffic issues. We already had to fight. 12 Oaks fought to get the light up, the flashing light, which there's still almost an accident a week. I don't know how many fatalities we've had in front of 12 Oaks and Joe Severio. It has to stop. Until you guys can fix the drainage issues, we cannot allow any more building to go on. I come from Houston. My home in Houston did not flood when I lived there. It's now a concrete jungle everywhere around it. In the last 4 years, it's flooded twice. Those effects will happen here. The same thing is going to happen here. I work from my home remotely. So not only did I lose my home for a brief amount of time, I lost my job for a brief amount of time. I had to go elsewhere to be able to work, and I had to focus on fixing my home. So I'm here to speak on behalf of 580 people that I had sign a petition that want to get this stopped. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Franklin Cordell.
Mr. Chairman, can we see that petition?
I'll get it.
Thank you for letting me speak. I've lived in my house for 28 years, and I've seen a lot in that 28 years. I've seen 6 inches of rain. I've seen 8 inches of rain. I've seen the culverts where the ditch goes underneath Highway 42 completely full. And that was just regular rain. If you put this subdivision in there, the rain's got nowhere to go. Right now, it's falling under woodlot and it's soaking up. You fill that thing full of concrete and guess what? You got a major problem. I don't want to lose my house. I'm the lowest part on Simpson Road. My house is the lowest one. With 6 inches of water, I got water coming back up toward my house. The house on the side of me is on stilts. Mine's on a slab. If you allow this subdivision to be built, I will get flooded out. And look, I'm too old to start over. I need your help. We need to kill this thing once and for all. I appreciate your time. Please vote with your heart.
Thank you. Is this Dwayne or Deanne Simpson? Not sure. Dwayne. Thank you.
I'm Dwayne Simpson, Mervyn Simpson's son. We live right in the front, right next door to Hudson Cove. The property right next to us is, we basically got 5 acres of that property that's right next to us. It is the primary drain route for every drop of water that comes from Simpson Road, maybe as far as Joseph Ario Road, rolling toward our property. It covers at an angle. I made some illustrations. I'm going to try to make this quick because clock is not my good part. Let's see. That popped on. All right. This is a cutaway illustration, and I guess it's going to be about as good visual as I'm going to get on it. This is basically the area where they have the flood water landed right here, but this is a depression right on our property line. Right on this edge right here at this spot, this is our property line. And this is our driveway, and right over there at the other, there's another ramp on our property, which is right before Simpson Road. All this is roughly at 22 foot above sea level. But you start adding dirt and fill. I'm going to show you the way the land is right now. This land where Hudson Cove is, this basically a huge ditch runs through here. I call it a canal because that's what I've always called it. But it runs through here, and the land drains this way at an angle where these red lines are. I didn't know this wouldn't be good visual enough. But it drains across here, and every drop of rainwater that comes from Simpson Road runs across our property. If you approve them, they're going to do this. We're back here. They're going to fill this in. That whole area, that depression that's up front, they're going to fill that in. My front yard is going to be the new low spot. And what's going to happen is that's where the water is going to travel across the road. It will create a new drainage ditch right on my dad's property line. My dad's property line does not have a ditch right now. It has no ditch at all. It's basically at this angle running across there, going to the next set of property, right at the property line. If you elevate that 3 and 4 foot like most of these developers do, you're condemning my daddy's property to become a bog. Now, he's not here to speak for himself because just with a double bypass. He's at home. He can't be here to give you the facts, the figures, the numbers, and all those things. I want you guys to reject this because it's going to flood us out, and it's going to flood everyone else around the area out. And I know I'm just talking about floods, but there's the infrastructure problem as well. And I don't have enough time. I'm out.
Thank you. Evelyn Adams.
Hello. I live on Simpson Road.
All right, move over to the microphone a little bit. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Adams, and I experienced Hurricane Betsy and Hurricane Katrina. I live on Simpson Road. This is the street behind Mr. Simpson, the person that just spoke. And we talk about the Great Flood of 2016. But there are serious problems every day with regular rain. In June of this year, there was a lot of rain. 2 more inches, I would have had water in my house. There is a serious drainage problem already. And to add this new subdivision would make it even worse. So please consider that there is a problem with regular hard rain, much less to add a whole nother problem with the subdivision.
Well, thank you. Christelle Adams. Christelle, did I say that wrong? Christelle. Yeah, well, I see it's not Christelle, it's somewhere.
Thank you, council members. Like most everyone else has already said, I don't want to repeat anyone, but we have a serious drainage problem already in the area that exists. Last August, with the big flood of almost the entire parish, we're right adjacent to Mr. Simpson's property. My backyard faces his property. At the height of that storm, I would say there was maybe 20 yards from my back patio to where the flood line was. And that's getting pretty doggone close. A few more hours of rain and we probably would have gone under. I know what it's like. I've experienced Hurricane Katrina where the family lost everything. And I don't know if we could handle another flood. Once is enough. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's all the speakers that we had in opposition. We had 4 cards that were in opposition that checked off they do not wish to. Oh, Randy, let's see where you. I saw your card. Come on up, Mr. Shin. Sorry. I don't know what happened to you. I lost in all the paperwork. That's good.
Good evening, council members. I hope to give you adequate justification to maintain the denial of Hudson Cove in its current proposed layout, as I take this as personal as Home South does. In regards to item 1 of their appeal, if you look at Appendix 4 of the subdivision regulation, it clearly states in Section 17406A, approval of a preliminary plan does not constitute the approval of a final plat. To me, that means this is not a rubber stamp process. You have the ability to make changes or deny. Item 2 of their appeal is related to traffic and drainage. Yes, they did provide the information, but at unrealistic conditions. Their traffic study indicates that in 32 homes, there's going to be 38 trips. That's 38 vehicles or what. But I believe this to be underrated by at least 90% or greater. Most families have at least 2 cars for working adults and 1 for students or teens. That would put the numbers more like 64 to 96. That's additional cars on Highway 42 during rush hour. The drainage study is inadequate, as it only addresses rainwater. It does not correctly address Louisiana Civil Code 655, 656, and 658. The fact that we have negative, or the fact that it will have a negative impact on the floodplain by the use of fill. Can you turn on the video monitor? By displacing the flood zone for the sake of the new homes, which have been done approximately 490 lots in different subdivisions, with 5 additional phases for expansion in these already existing subdivisions. This is floodplain map 2205C0035E, which everybody that's spoken tonight, we all live in this area. And a lot of people aren't even here that live in that area. So item 5, kind of like in conclusion, was the council's previous decision. I contend that for the health and safety and welfare of the existing homeowners in the floodplain, floodplain map of 2205C0035 Echo, that the Hudson Cove plat be denied based on the facts that I am offering you tonight. Building on this land must be done with piers, pilings, and a roadway must be at the same elevation as the existing land level. No fill, no rerouting of natural drainage, no burdensome increase on natural drainage should be allowed
We'll
within
have
this
to
flood
wrap up,
zone map.
Mr. Shin. You'll have to wrap it up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we had 4 cards in opposition, Seth Vaccaro, Hazel and Russell Monsereau, Kayla Smith, and Caitlin Edge. And now, do we have a representative from the applicant, Home South Communities? Yes. No, they get.
Good evening, gentlemen, ladies, Ms. Casso, good to see you again. My name's David Cohn. I'm here representing Home South Communities, LLC. Home South Communities is engaged in an offer to purchase the 12 acres of land that's the subject of Hudson Cove. They are the applicant. They are the developer. Their engineer is Quality Engineering, and who has presented the preliminary plat at the Planning Commission hearing. Planning Commission hearing obviously turned down the preliminary plat. This is an appeal from that April 12th Planning Commission hearing. We're here today to ask you to overturn that decision and approve the preliminary plat for the development of Hudson Cove. Hudson Cove is a piece of property located on the south side of LA 42, about 8/10 of a mile east of Highway 44, Council District 5, zone medium intensity residential. It's a 32-lot subdivision. It met every parish requirement. It obtained the consent and approval of your planning staff and their engineering group, and it obtained the approval of the outside engineering review agency, who also approved the subdivision plat as having met parish guidelines for development. So with that, before I get into the rest of our presentation, I will tell you that based on where we sit, we believe that because we met all the criteria required by the parish, that this development is presumptively valid. And for the Planning Commission before you and for you today to not approve this subdivision, there has to be something extremely compelling for you to come forth with to articulate that will say that despite meeting all of your criteria, you're going to turn down the subdivision. At the Planning Commission hearing, like many of these subdivisions, the issues boil down to drainage, they boil down to traffic, and they boil down to its impact on the people. And Ascension Parish has a lot of similarities to East Baton Rouge Parish right now, as there are traffic problems intermittent within the parish in different places. But you have one zoning ordinance that covers your entire parish. You don't break it out into different zoning districts that have different criteria based on need. I took to heart some of the comments Mr. Sadley made earlier about the need to identify in this parish the different drainage issues, different traffic issues, and try and tailor something that can accommodate not only the growth, but also to manage the growth for the parish. I'm going to ask Derek Murphy to make a very brief presentation about this subdivision, its design, its location, and particularly the drainage study that was prepared by an engineer of his office. So Derek, if you don't mind, would you step up and please make that presentation?
Good evening. My name is Derek Murphy of Quality Engineering and Surveying, representing Home South, the developer on this piece of property. I'm here tonight to address the drainage. As you heard from many of the residents, drainage is of concern in this area. We understand that this area is a drainage collector for roughly about 35.5 acres surrounding this piece of property. Some of the things were accurate that was said tonight. A lot of it was not accurate. What we're here to say tonight is looking at, and I'll bring it up on this monitor here so everybody can see. In this particular case, there is some fill that's going to be placed on this piece of property. But one thing I want to make sure that we notice is that due to your floodplain ordinance that's in this parish, we meet the detention and the floodplain mitigation requirements, which is some stipulations that we have to meet in order for the drainage impact study to be approved by the engineering review agency and also to meet the subdivision regulations. So just like everybody's saying, y'all are going to fill up, where's the water going to go? This is an actual cross-section, as you see here, the existing grade on the site as it sits today. Just like you can see some mitigatable fill, mitigation means a floodplain mitigation, you can also see some cut coming out. Thus, we're going to offset the fill with the cut coming into being placed in this property. We're going to balance the site, if you will, in this property. The base flood elevation out here is at elevation 20. With elevations of the property, the ditch actually has a bottom elevation of 9. That's where our pond pool is going to be. You can also see on this side here, which is along the Simpson Road side, as well as here, which is along the Simpson Road side, we're not going to fill that side. That's some of the misstatements earlier. We're not filling on that side. We're still going to collect all the drainage coming onto here and route it just like it's routing today, as well as reducing the flow coming out. We ran HEC-RAS models to prove that the 25-year and the 100-year storm at the upstream corner of the site matches pre-development as well as post-development flows. We know that Highway 42 in the front is low. It's well below the base flood. In fact, it has an elevation of around 14 to 15, with the base flood being at 20. Highway 42 is low there. Whether we're here or not, it's still going to have issues being, and it's a state highway. We will balance our fill on site. We will not offset the plane. We will not have adverse effect on the neighboring properties. Thank you.
Eric, a question. Evident in your analysis, redevelopment or post-development, discharge, peak discharge, what are the comparisons of those?
The post-development flows, I don't know the exact numbers, let me look at them real quick. For a 25-year storm, for going to Muddy Creek under Highway 42, for pre-development, it's 140 CFS, with post-development being 100 CFS. So we're reducing the flow coming off the site and detaining it on site. We're able to do that because of the mitigation. Our detention pond is really oversized for the tension, but we meet our mitigation requirements.
What's the 10 years? 10
The 10-year, it gets reduced from 123 CFS to 86 CFS leaving the site.
Parish regulations has you designed for,
We've designed this for the 25-year.
what's the minimum?
10.
10-year.
You over, difference between the 100-year flood, pre and post development peak discharge.
192 CFS compared to 148.
Derek, explain how the pond, drainage into the pond works. How does that limit the flow?
What we do is we use the tailwater coming from Muddy Creek, and what we do is we choke down using corrugated metal pipes in this particular case. We actually take all the drainage coming from this site, pass it through to the pond, and let it, and kind of meter it out coming out of the pond. And that's how we reduce our flow.
The drainage study that you have here, that drainage, is that the drainage study that was approved by the Parish review agency?
Yes.
And that would be the planning staff and their outside review agency?
Yeah, the engineering review agency.
And they are engineers?
Yes. Well, the engineering review agency, yes.
Thank you, Derek. Gentlemen, another, and Ms. Casso, another issue is the traffic. We have a traffic study that was prepared by Lawrence Lambert. I'm going to ask Lawrence to make a brief presentation about the traffic study that you have in your binder, and that was also part of this package.
Thank you. Good evening. So this particular development being 32 units generates less than 40 peak hour trips, which puts us in a threshold zero traffic impact study. So your ordinance specifies that a threshold zero traffic study consists of a trip generation utilizing the Institute Traffic Engineers trip generation manual. That manual is specified in your ordinance. It's called out by name. So the formulas that you see in this report were pulled from that manual. And then the other thing that is required is a site distance evaluation. So we go out to the site, we look at the proposed driveway, and we kind of take a picture to the right and to the left and make sure that there's not a retaining wall or a tree or something like that that would obscure someone's vision exiting the subdivision. So we want to make sure that that is, you have good sight lines coming out of the subdivision. So that is what consists of a threshold zero. So we did that. You know, just to speak to some of the comments I heard earlier, you know, the 38 trips, that is within an hour. It's not a day. It's not over a 3-hour period. It doesn't consist of every car in the home entering and leaving. You're talking about a 1-hour period. So yes, you may have a home that has 2 or 3 cars, but you're looking at a little average of more than 1 car per house coming in just that 1-hour period. And this is a national standard. This is probably the most utilized land use in that manual. It has one of the highest statistical reliability factors to it, and is highly accepted all over the country. So these are very, very highly used numbers nationally.
Question. In your report, and I'm looking at page 4, we've talked about the trips generated during AM peak period, PM peak period, 32 and 38 respectively. But you have another item here. You've got new trips entering and exiting. What are the significance of these numbers? What do they mean?
Yeah, sure. So the generated trips are the overall trips, entering and leaving the subdivision. And so when you are dealing with single-family residential, you normally are in a commuter pattern where people are leaving in the morning and then predominantly returning in the afternoon. And so if you look in the morning, you have 24 trips leaving the subdivision while 8 are coming in. And that could be a return trip or, you know, delivery type, some type of a service vehicle, something like that. So you have 24 leaving, 8 entering, so a total of 32 trips. In the afternoon, again, we're in that commute traffic pattern where we have more returning than leaving. So we have 24 entering, 14 leaving for a total of 38 trips.
You've got in your report on page 6 some photographs. Explain what the site distance criteria was that you had to meet.
Sure, sure. So the Louisiana Department of Transportation Development, DOTD, has certain criteria that they use for sight distance. And so it's a function of the speed of the road. So it's a 55-mile-an-hour road. So if you look on page 5 of the report, there's a table in there that we pull from DOTD, and it specifies how far you need to be able to see based on speed. And so this will be used when they put in the driveway to make sure that no obstructions are within that sight triangle.
Okay. And 42, that is a state highway?
Yes, sir.
I think that the presentation at the Planning Commission and the presentation here establishes that, at least from an engineering standpoint, the impact on the property and on the adjoining property will not be significant. In fact, from a drainage standpoint, it's not supposed to impact it at all. That was vetted by the private engineer, it was vetted by your engineers, and it was vetted by an outside review agency engineer who was paid to look at this stuff. From the traffic standpoint, this particular project and the size of its lots, 32 lots, has a very minimal impact on the traffic conditions as they now exist. Are they bad? I think they are. I've heard enough from the folks here to think they do have some problems out there, but I hear that all over the parish. I don't hear it just on LA 42. I hear it in other places too. But when a developer comes in from outside or from inside, it doesn't matter. They're supposed to have a set of rules that they can abide by, that they understand, that you can go through the process where you get vetted for the same reasons that everybody else gets vetted for. This parish created subdivision regulations that are parish-wide. So if I have a development in Donaldsonville, it's held to the same standard as one in Prairieville. But as we all stand here, I stand, you sit here today, we all know those are two different places. Things are happening differently there. Things are different on 42 than they are on 73. I mean, it's kind of unique in a way to their own, but we've got one set of rules. So you have to apply those rules uniformly to everybody. You have to apply them the same. Well, when you created the rules, I mean, there's a statement in your traffic impact analysis and a similar statement dealing with drainage that says that the purpose and intent of these requirements is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens and visitors of Ascension Parish by ensuring the provision of safe and adequate transportation facilities. Now, that was the preamble to creating these rules. Now, I have followed what's going on in Ascension Parish for a lot of years. I think my first run down here was maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and the parish was growing then. It was having its growing pains, but still, what I've seen happen over time is this body, not you folks, but those who sit where you sit, have grappled with this development issue from time to time. The last time I can remember, probably 4 or 5 years ago, where, you know, developers started seeing impact fees. Developers started seeing more stringent criteria for development. Things got more expensive. I think it has slowed down development. I think it has created revenue for the parish. But by the same token, it may not have solved all the problems, but it's the body here who created that set of rules. And that was the give and take of the political process as the I guess the compromise between those who say no more development until we catch up versus those who say no, we can't stop it because it's not fair to the people who want to sell their property, and we want to grow, we want to generate jobs, we want people, create tax base. I mean, y'all really have a great thing down here. It's just trying to figure out how to manage it is the problem. Well, in the figuring of how to manage the problem, my client, Home South Communities, is caught up in the dragnet. And the dragnet is that there's this anti-development sentiment that wants to be applied to them when they meet all of the criteria. And quite frankly, I think it is being applied differently than it's been applied historically, just in the last several years. I took a snapshot, and I provided some of these to y'all in a binder of the Planning Commission meetings that I sort of looked at. Nearly every, and I took my snapshot from January of 2016 to April of 17. Now, April of 17 is where we were turned down for our subdivision, and we may have been the only one there. Some of these months, there weren't any subdivision preliminary plat approvals or being sought for approval. But for those that were being sought, almost uniformly, there was one, maybe two, that the planning staff wouldn't approve, and the Planning Commission approved them. But for the rest of them, they were approved by the planning staff, and they were approved by the Planning Commission, except for three. And they were overturned on appeal. And I think the criteria that I came up with in my very unscientific study is that for those subdivisions that were met with opposition publicly, like these folks are doing today, they got turned down. For those that nobody showed up or said a whole lot, they sailed right on through. Now, I don't think that is really a uniform application, because and it's difficult to compare because they are all different. But I was just taking that snapshot. But I think one of the criteria that you got to follow is that you need a uniform application of these rules, and those rules, when applied, will tell anybody that if you do A, B, C, and D, you're going to be okay. And even the state case law says you're not supposed to look at each situation on a purely ad hoc political basis. So, there's lots of debate in your planning commission and in this council about what the standards are. That's for lawyers to argue about. And quite frankly, it's complicated. But the one thing at a minimum, there's criteria for state law, there's criteria under federal law, there's cases under both of them that everybody can grab a hold of to try and get some footing. But if you take the worst case scenario for the developer, which is under the case law, then you've got a strict scrutiny to come up with some very compelling reasons of why to turn this down in furtherance of whatever your public goal is. Now, as I said earlier, we come in here today, we think under the law, straight up, with an approval. It's presumptively valid. So stripping it down is is what the government's burden is. It's not our burden to prove it anymore that it's valid. We proved it when it met all criteria. And I think we've successfully rebutted many of the comments that deal with drainage, deal with traffic. And I don't minimize what these folks say. I only say it that they're sharing the problem of everybody in the parish. And the parish solution, it doesn't come by, kicking the 32-lot subdivision can down the road. It comes with a more comprehensive view of planning and zoning, and that's where, that was the part of Mr. Satterley's comments, I think, that I heard that I'm assuming those are the kinds of things he has in mind when he's asking for information to come from on studies that will allow that, just to find out where the problems are. But to say you're actually trying to engage a study tells me you don't know where it's at. So for my people, and I'm talking about Home South communities, a 32-lot subdivision, they build houses for people, one at a time. You're going to put the burden of this development stoppage on them and those who come after them. And when you do, I don't think it's in fairness to them or their landowner who they've been engaged with to purchase this property. It's not fair to them either. So, there's another side to this coin. Where it hurts one, your decision will hurt another. You got to make a choice, and that's what happens. And I think that in that sense, I can't really say anymore because the facts are the facts. You have to evaluate them and make your decision. And I hope you make the right decision, and I think the right decision is to approve this subdivision.
Okay. Are there any questions for the applicant? Mr. Lambert, you have some questions?
Is he finished with his presentation?
I presume so.
I'm done.
Okay.
So we're going to open up for questions for the applicant first. And then we'll go to discussion. Mr. Cluott.
I think he's looking to make a motion.
Yeah, I think we have some questions for the applicant first, and we'll.
Question away.
Mr. Cluott.
Yeah. Mr. Kahn?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Before I address my questions to you and the rest of your development team, I want to ask our legal, Mr. Parrington. Mr. Parrington, based on our decision to not to have the appeals board and have it come in front of us, is it legal for us to vote this thing up or down tonight?
Based on what?
Based on what we're doing tonight, is it
Yes.
legal for us to vote it up or down?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I
Y'all
just want
know
to
the
clear
legal
that up.
board.
Any further questions for the
Yeah,
applicant?
well, no, I got more than one.
Oh, you got more than one?
I got more than
Go
one
ahead.
question. I don't believe, based on looking at the people that are here and what they're saying, and I don't think the traffic is the biggest thing. You probably agree with that. I think the drainage situation is the biggest thing, the flood, okay? The possible flood. And we've had multiple times, I've been to a lot of planning and zoning commission meetings, and I see planning and zoning commission members in the audience, and where it's been explained to me by at least 3 different engineering groups about how they mitigate the water based on that one piece of land. But the true worry of a lot of people in the community is not what you're going to do there. You can dig a hole to take up that water. What are you going to do with the plane that used to be there that it ran across, okay? And that's something that, Derek, with all respect, that's something that's nervous to people when they see more development. Now, on the flip side of the coin, I looked at the petition that had been turned in with all the names, and people live in subdivisions, okay? And, you know, I don't know, somebody might have been mad when they built those subdivisions, the guy next to them or something. But based on events of the last year or so, people have a very heightened awareness of what's going to happen when somebody builds up land next to them, okay? And I'm not asking you for an answer, I'm just relating, and based on what you talked about, that everything that y'all did, your group, or the people you represent rather, did as they went in front of our planning and zoning department, and it was reviewed based on our planning and zoning and our rules and regulations, and then it went to the Planning and Zoning Commission, that y'all felt like y'all met the letter of the law. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right? I'm not going to disagree on that. That's up to legal people to decide. I just want to let everybody know our staff at our Planning and Zoning Department is people that work for a living every day, and they look at things based on the regulations that they're given. They don't have the authority to up or down something. Their recommendations are generally based on whether you meet criteria, and apparently you met criteria, okay? As it goes to the commission, this is an appointed board, and those guys and ladies, whomever, are appointed ad hoc by the council, and they generally come from different areas, and they're there to give, not an elected official's view, but basically a public view, okay? So, you know, what they vote up or down. I took very, very close attention to your comments based on that when subdivisions, when there's no one to come to the meetings against something, that it generally goes, and when when people come to the meetings against it, then it usually goes down. You know, that may be very true. But being an elected official, I'm elected to represent people. Okay, each one of us up here represent at least 10,000 people or so, okay? So, not to say that we're steered by public opinion, but we represent people. We're steered by their opinion of the people. So, sometimes things that meet the letter of the law may not be the best thing for a neighborhood or an area or whatever. You know, so, you know, this is probably close to a court of law, but a little bit short of it at this point. So we are elected folks that we made a decision that when we were going to be elected, that we were going to represent people. And we're going to have to make decisions. Some's going to make them happy, some's going to make you happy every now and then, you know. So, not necessarily browbeaten, but you made a good point. You on yours. Like I said, I'm just telling you I think the major concern is based on drainage. And we know that you can scientifically mitigate the acreage that you are with, and you can actually even do some improvements to help other areas if you dig more drainage canals that go to major canals and things like that. But we've had so many cases where it wasn't proven that what's being done in that piece of land is the best thing for the total floodplain. And I'm not going to question, you know, your integrity or any engineer or not. I'm telling you what the concerns of the people are, and that's just what my statement. Thank you.
Okay, so you know, we're new to this, so you know the procedure, and I apologize I didn't outline this before, but first we're going to just ask questions if we have any questions for the applicant. After we get a motion and a second, then we'll go through the parliamentary procedure of discussion. So at this point, we're only on questions for the applicant.
He can respond to what I said. I'm all right with that.
I didn't hear a question, but I didn't really.
I apologize for sounding so direct and not being a question.
Mr. Satterley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to be sure that you and I, Mr. Dawson are on the same. I was not questioning your authority as chair to do this in the order that you saw. It's just that in the past, it seems like we always, in this body, entertain a motion in the second and then have the discussion as is in Robert's Rules of Order. But I'm fine with however we do this tonight. I would say this. I'm a little bit disturbed already that there are two sides to everything. Clearly, that's the case tonight. And one side was given almost unlimited time. And at points in that time, I quite frankly felt like I was in a court of law. And although Mr. Kluot believes that we're the next best thing, I'm no attorney, I assure you, or anything like that. But in line with all that,
I didn't think we were the next best thing. I
Well,
thought we were the next thing, the
next
next
thing
step
to it. I misspoke. And I thank Mr. Kluot for the correction and the interruption. So I will just say this, though, okay? Not being an attorney or anything like that, I still am required to kind of look at our codes and try to interpret them the best way I can and make the best decision I can, which I believe is what our Planning and Zoning Commission did, that, as Mr. Kluot also pointed out, that we duly appointed. So I would ask you the following questions, Mr. Cohn. Repeatedly, as you took several bites of the apple tonight, you sort of admonished this body that we need to be, and let me see if I can get your exact words here. We need to have compelling reasons for denial. Compelling reasons. In your opinion, sir, is the public's health, safety, and welfare a compelling reason? If the belief of this body it is an and, the P&Z by a majority vote believed that their health, safety, and they articulated the same, and welfare was being jeopardized.
I think your parish ordinance on the subdivision regulations, which include both drainage and traffic, are directed at health, safety, and welfare of the public, and they were created by this parish with a preamble that says that's why it was created, to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the parish. So, and as it follows, the criteria that were established by this body, voted on by the people, in the subdivision regulations.
Oh, okay, very fine. Let me ask you about that. You also said, and I'm going to try to get the quote, that every parish requirement, it met, meaning your client's proposal, met every parish requirement.
Yes, sir.
You then, of course, are aware of Appendix 3 of our Land Development Code, which as a result of being the appendix, it is law. It references our master plan, and it has in there guiding principles. Ms. Doppel, I believe, tonight, and certainly at other times has mentioned these repeatedly. A former planning director, Compton, did as well. Fortunately, he's not with us anymore tonight. It says in there that in making a decision, as a deliberative body, that the Planning and Zoning Commission should discourage development if there's inadequate infrastructure. What do you say to that?
I think it's a criteria that was created, but you have to remember that Appendix 3 was created at the same time you submitted the subdivision regulations. So let me say it this way. If you take that one step further and you say, okay, if there's inadequate infrastructure, let's say on LA 42, so we're going to stop it all on LA 42. Where is there going to be discretion in, okay, we're going to now stop it on 73, we're going to go stop it on the connecting streets?
Okay, so very fine.
Where does it end, I guess, Mr. Satterley?
Well, I appreciate you bringing up discretion.
No, but who makes that decision?
Well, I'm going to try to answer
criteria?
you. Give me a shot here. I'm glad you brought up discretion, because it's been a big hot topic, and went all the way to the point, of course, I'm sure you realize, because you have it in your, what I consider to be sort of a legal brief in this appeals packet that's thicker than the Bible up here, the Attorney General's opinion. I might also add Louisiana Revised Statute 33101.1, as well as the P&Z's own legal counsel, Mr. Cody Martinez, who has told the P&Z on a recent occasion that it's okay for you to deny on health, safety, and welfare if you believe that's being jeopardized. So just a real pointed question. Do you believe that the P&Z has discretionary authority? And certainly you're not denying that this body has discretionary authority.
Are you asking me that from a legal standpoint?
Well, sir, you're capable, and you can answer it any way you want. I mean, I'm sincerely asking you, do you believe, and let me give a little history here. You may not remember this, but when I was a planning and zoning commissioner, you mentioned that this began, I don't know, about 10 years ago, but certainly when I sat about 5 or 6 years ago, there was a subdivision called Marcy Oaks. I remember asking you that night as a new commissioner, having just went through my Capital Regional Planning Commission training, which is another question I have. You know, Mr. Chairman, hopefully with your blessing, I'd like to bring the issue that Ms. Gupple brought up earlier about all councilmen certainly having that training. I don't know if you've had it, sir. You can go on record to say you have or haven't. But in Marcy Oaks, you said that pretty much the P&Z, when all the codes are met, is a rubber stamp body. And I asked you that because I even said it this way. My wife and I have a hot tub, and we frequent that, and that's pretty much where we do our family discussions, and politics is always on the table. And it was her question, I called her that night, you might remember my bride, to you, sir, why do we even have a planning and zoning commission if they don't have discretionary authority? Now, that's notwithstanding whatever opinion is rendered, and I emphasize that. It's a recommendation or opinion of the staff only to say codes have been met or not. Perhaps they don't believe Appendix 3 is necessary. I've heard people say it's outdated, whatever. But the way I look at it, sir, it's law, whether we like it or not. It's sort of like tonight when I get out and I go out on Irma Boulevard. I don't know what the posted speed limit is, but for sake of argument, let's say it's 35 or 45, and I do 55, and the police officer pulls up and says, well, Councilman Sadler, you're speeding. Oh, no, I wasn't. I believe that sign is outdated. So, again, I mean, I think a lot of this is starting to be kind of silly. I mean, we have appointed a body. It has made a recommendation to us. And I, for one, they're the guys that vetted it. I've read their stuff. I've read your stuff. And I do believe that they are correctly finding that the health, safety, and welfare of the people, and this particularly as it relates to drainage. You know, we can argue all night long about the traffic, okay? But we saw the pictures tonight again from these folks. In fact, I'd love to have, it's not in our packet, that little graph that Mr. Murphy used of the pond in all your building, because I have all kinds of questions about that, and we're trying to work on that right now in committee. But, you know, who's going to maintain these detention ponds that are working these alleged miracles years down the line when they silt in? What happens if the detention pond is not properly drained down at the time in which we have a 3 to 4 day in a row high rain event? Do you have any proof, sir, that the detention ponds, the work, you talk about all the mathematical formulae, years down the line, and not cause any flooding problems on adjacent property owners when they continue to get up in front of us over and over by the, no longer by the tens or dozens or scores, but by the hundreds? Well, I mean, we've had 555 people sign a petition against the development on Highway 73 Wednesday, which went forward in this case by a narrow 2-to-1 vote, having been turned down previously by a 2-to-1 vote and sanctioned by this council by a 10-0 vote. But down the line, you know, back to my bride's question, if we do not have discretionary authority, and I believe we means both the P&Z and this body, then we're nowhere. We might as well just let the planning department say, look, all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. You know, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. I mean, you got to approve this.
I still believe that the Planning and Zoning Commission's discretion has to relate to the compliance with the subdivision regulations. And if it complies with the subdivision regulations, then they don't have the discretion. I believe. And
that includes Appendix 3. You want to be on record tonight to say that
yes.
the master plan does not govern decision-making processes of the Planning and Zoning Commission?
I didn't say that. I said you read it all
What does the state tell us about that? You're an attorney.
Well, there are two schools of thought on that. One's under federal law, one's under state law. Under state law, you have an attorney general opinion, and there's several Louisiana Court of Appeal cases that say that the Planning and Zoning Commission has a discretion, but it's not regular discretion, it's strict scrutiny. And under constitutional guidelines, that means you have to come up with something very compelling. You can't just have a rational reason for it, and it has to be reasonable, whatever that basis is. In the federal scheme, there is case law that says that when you have a subdivision that meets all of the criteria, that the action of the Planning Commission is purely administrative, is not legislative. That's where the rubber stamp comes from.
Okay, I have one final, just to get along the tooth, one final question. Mr. Cohn, do we have state law that essentially states that if you're a parish and you have, by your police jury or parish council, established a planning and zoning commission, their job to develop a master plan, and therefore if you have a P&Z, you must have a master plan, and that the latter, it says in the state law, must be taken into consideration in making decisions by the P&Z to either accept or deny subdivisions, yes or no?
I'm not aware of the state law. I'm aware of a case that came out of Zachary.
Would you like me to send you that state law, sir?
You can.
Okay, I'd be glad to do that.
But it's probably cited in the Zachary Housing Partners case.
Again, I'm not an attorney, but again, I can read that code, and I was asking you for your interpretation of it, but if you're not aware of it, I think that's your answer.
Well, do I put my finger on it? No. Will I know it? Probably.
I'm done, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? And I will, Mr. Lawler.
A couple. Thank you, Mr. Cohn. And some of these questions may be better answered by the engineering firms. How much fill is going to be used at this site?
Can you respond to that, please?
Roughly about 25,000 cubic yards. Cut and fill.
As far as the methods for studying drainage, there are different studies that can be done. Is that correct? There's not one way to study the effect of drainage on property.
That's correct. There's many methods.
Okay. Do y'all choose the method that is done, or is that chosen by the parish?
That's actually per ordinance.
Yes.
Say it again.
It's per ordinance. It's in your drainage code, your subdivision codes. So,
We don't have a chairman, so I don't want to interrupt with parliamentary procedure, but as I read that ordinance, doesn't it?
Yeah, Vice Chair. We got Vice Chairman right here.
Oh, okay, Mr. Vice Chairman, can I?
I mean, come on, no, I don't sit up here that
I
often.
apologize to you, Mr. Joseph. May I say something?
But
I'll yield the chair.
all right.
It's just a follow-up to, they were having a discussion here, and I want to be sure the record's clear. When I read this ordinance that y'all are talking about, it says that y'all get together on this, does it not? Because we're considering that in our committee right now, and decide. And therefore, the answer to Mr. Lawler's question, in my mind anyway, I could be wrong, is that whatever you decide is what this drainage study is going to look like. I'm not saying that's the wrong thing, whatever is decided, but I mean, you don't have to do detention ponds. Could you not, for example, build up on piers and not bring in any fill or a minimal amount of fill, et cetera, et cetera? I mean, you guys, and again, I understand that's what the law says, that y'all get together and you design this study, and if we agree upon it, we've agreed upon it. Is that not correct?
There are ordinances that claim what to use. There are ordinances that claim the 10-year, the SES method, the 24-hour storm, what types of storms we use. There are ordinances that state we have to fill, especially under the roads, within 1 foot of the base flood elevation.
I understand all that, yes, I got that.
Yes, so we are dictated by parish law.
I'm not talking about those codes per se, but the drainage impact study law.
Yes, we have certain codes that we have to meet, yes, sir.
So are all drainage impact studies identical in? Or are they specific to each development?
They're specific to each development.
Thank you, that's all I had to say. I yield back to Mr. Lawler.
Thank you. But as far as the methodology goes, do you have any variance on what methodology you use, or is that all in ordinance?
It's in the ordinance, but there are some variations, yes.
Okay.
You can use different type of methods, such as rationale, Malcolm method, different things like that. SCS method is the most, is actually stated in the codes.
But you have freedom to use other methods?
If the ERA or ERA or the planning staff allows.
Okay. Do they ever allow different? I'm just asking for my own information. Do they ever allow differently, or has that ever been something that's come up?
Yes.
Okay. And why would that be a reason to, why is there a need to use different methods?
Well, it just depends on the rainfall events. In this particular case, we use the SCS method as dictated in the code, and that's what we have been using for quite some time.
No, I think that's probably all the questions I have for you, Derek. Thank you. I do have some other questions, though. No supposed or not supposed to impact drainage at all, I think was your statement. I don't think that's good enough for the people around the area, the people on Simpson Road, the people that live behind them, the Arnolds that live right behind them. That's one of the concerns that I have, that we don't know. It's not supposed to impact drainage, but that is not that it will not impact drainage. Is that a fair statement?
Well, all we can, I mean, we can't predict what's going to happen in the future. That's very speculative for sure. But based on the engineering guidelines, it works. It works. It's vetted by more than one engineer, and it works. I mean, the folks have a fear. I mean, the folks who showed up at the Planning Commission meeting concerned about drainage made a lot of valid points. One of those points was, and it relates to a comment made earlier about how do we know the detention pond's not going to be silted in 10 years and who's going to take care of it. Well, that, you know, that's covered under the subdivision regulations. But by the same token, I stood back there just a moment ago and heard your 2 years backlog on cleaning out your own ditches. And there was a lady, Miss Shin, I believe it was Miss Shin, who showed up at the Planning Commission hearing, and her confidence level was as much deterred by the lack of progress that she's seen by the parish in cleaning out its own ditches than it was, at least as much or more than this development. And her fear and the fear of the others, you know, their homes did not flood. They got waters in their yard and they were scared to death, and there was water in the street. It filled it up. One of the ladies said her husband was having to swim to the house. But I mean, I had a camp on False River flood. We had people flood all over Baton Rouge. They flooded all over Livingston. This was a 500 to 1,000-year storm event, and we are now talking today about the concerns created by that flood event. Yet, this parish, after August of last year, did it come in and revise its subdivision regulations to force developers to engineer a 500-year to 1,000-year flood event? No. Why? Because it would have ended development. So here we are, meeting all the parish guidelines. We've got this 300-pound gorilla on our back called the August flood that we can't get off of it. And that's the problem here. That's the big problem here. So to say we think it's going to work, I think what we're saying is it's going to work based on what the engineering folks say is going to happen, and that's the only thing we have to rely on. And when this body created those subdivision regulations, this body told the public this is what's going to protect the health, safety, and welfare of this community. And if it doesn't, you change it.
Well, what I've got concerns about is we're adding 25,000 cubic yards of fill in a flood zone.
He said cut and fill. He's not bringing fill from off-site and dumping it on this place.
No, he's digging out a pond and putting it there.
He's digging it from the pond, and this drainage, there's a canal or a ditch or something that meanders through this property and this development is going to install and improve that drainage system to where it works.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
The entirety of that property is in a flood zone, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All of it?
No.
About 95%, yes.
Okay,
Most of it.
95%.
But just to make sure you're clear, we have to balance the site, not from the complete cut and the fill, but above the pool stage of the pond. So we balance of open air to open air.
Now, I understand how it works, but we are adding fill to a floodplain, which we have already learned is not the best idea. And we've heard that from multiple sources, and we don't know right now as we speak, and we're looking at floodplain management at this moment, we don't know where it's okay to add fill into a floodplain and where it's not. So at this point, we're going to change a floodplain. We're going to put fill, we're going to build up some area in a floodplain. I don't see how that's a wise decision at this time when there's a remedy for it. The remedy would be to build on pier and piling. Wouldn't that be a way to do it without increasing the height of the land there, except for the road?
The disagreement I have there is when you build on slab, you're actually mitigating all the dirt that you're putting within the floodplain. When you're building on piers, all right, you don't have to allocate for any of the pier volume, any volume that people put under their house if they build up, so forth. At least this way, you get 100% of what you're putting in the floodplain coming out of the floodplain.
Well, at this point, I think it's premature, though. I mean, we're looking at our flood plans. You know, I think if this development were to come back once we've figured out how we're going to handle our floodplain development and we have a plan in place, I think it'd stand a much better chance, you know, depending on what is found at that point. But at this point, we're in the very middle of figuring out our floodplain development plans and how to mitigate the problems that we've had before. And this is not simply a 500-year flood. We have people all over this parish that have standing water, not in their ditches, but in their houses, and they've been surrounded by development, and there's always been the statement, it's not supposed to flood you. Well, it's not supposed to, isn't? It's not going to. That's the concern here, is that you can't tell us without a doubt it's not going to flood the people on Simpson Road, it's not going to flood the people behind them. I mean, when you look at the floodplain map, you see this V, this blue V of floodplain, and that's this subdivision. And, you know, we're at a point right now, I think if you come back in 6 months once we have a floodplain development plan and see what we require in that area, it may be pier and piling, and you'll be able to do a pier and piling in that area, and that may be approved. But at this point, I think it's very dangerous to start moving streams and natural waterways in a floodplain. I think it's a very dangerous precedent that we're setting. Now, if this was not a floodplain, that would be a different story. But because this is lying in a floodplain, I think we're setting a very dangerous precedent.
That precedent's been set time and time again.
And we're here to change it. And that's what we're going to do. I mean, that's the...
But you change it through your regulations. You don't change it through a skewed interpretation of your own ordinance to get to a result. I mean, that's what we're talking about here.
I mean, I'm going to disagree with you on that. I don't think it's that skewed. I think there are serious health and safety concerns for the people that live around it. I mean, we're going to add it's very concerning. We're going to build up land on one side, and we're going to take for granted that this is all going to work, that it's supposed to work, but we don't know if it is, and it doesn't have a history of always working. If the history was 100%, you probably wouldn't have a problem, but the history is not 100% that it doesn't flood people. We have a situation on Highway 44 where the property owner right behind the new subdivision is a commercial owner, and he's got water inches from his building, and I think he's like a printer. He's got paper in there. It's not supposed to do that, but it is.
But I'm not minimizing the fears of the people, and I'm not strenuously disagreeing with your conclusion of the speculative nature of what could happen. But what I am saying is that you can say that about any development that is approved in this parish as to whether it may or may not work. I mean, the argument you're making, or the justification you're making, is one that you can make for any subdivision that lies partly or within a flood zone area, period. I mean, you can make that same argument. But your regulations don't say you can't build in a floodplain. They don't say that. So what do? You do what you're trying to do now. In your meetings and your committees, is come up with something acceptable. I mean, you're trying to do the job you were elected to do. But to bounce a 32-lot subdivision as a stopgap until you get there, that's not fair to this developer, and it's not fair to that landowner. Just not fair.
Thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Mr. Dempsey Lambert,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to go ahead and uphold the planning and zoning's denial. I'd like to do it in the form of a motion.
Second.
have a motion by Mr. Dempsey Lambert, a second by Councilman Satterlee, and that motion is to accept the recommendation of the Planning Committee to deny the preliminary plat for the proposed subdivision. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Lawler.
I think that through the questioning, through the discussion, to hear both sides of this, there are very compelling reasons. And I don't think we're here in any way to shut down development, but when we have a situation where there's a planned development in a flood zone with the tremendous amount of fill that will be taken out the ground but built up in other areas, I think there are some safety concerns, some valid safety concerns for the people that live around the proposed development. There are also safety traffic concerns. I'm familiar with Joseph Ariel Road and Highway 42. We've had accidents there. I think there has been a fatality there several years back. Adding more traffic in that area is going to set a just one step up. It just makes it ever more likely that something's going to happen. And I think it's very difficult for the people in that live in that area to accept this. You know, it's a difficult thing, you know, to stop development on somebody's property because there's a landowner here, there is a developer. But I think at this time it's the best thing. I think in 6 months, if we come back after we have a floodplain management plan, we look at it again. We possibly look at ways of interconnectivity with subdivisions, having less entrances in and out of the subdivision, if it can be connected to another one in some way. There are possibilities to remedy all these situations. I think we need to look at it. But right now, there's a general welfare concern for the people in that entire area for traffic-wise. But in the immediate area, there are flooding concerns. There are no guarantees that they're not going to get flooded. And I, for one, I'm not willing to do that for the people that live around there because we're right around the corner from a floodplain management plan. And I think once we get to that, we may find a better way to do this, which will be acceptable to everybody, excuse me.
Any further discussion? Councilman Kluot.
David and Derek, one thing that does hit home, and the people recognize that, is that you're here, what you've done is followed the letter of the law. So it's up to us that if we want to do different for the people, we need to get off our butts and change it, okay? And that's some of what Aaron's talking about tonight. So we're going to work in that direction, and it's 32 house subdivision or 432 house subdivision. I don't want to put the 300-pound gorilla on your back, but it made history, such as several bad storms before in history. And it's a direct reflection on what people want and what their fears are. Thank you, sir.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, is there any opposition to the motion to accept the recommendation of the Planning Commission to deny?
Not in opposition, but Mr. Chairman, I'd like to state my reasons for the record.
Okay.
I mean,
Councilman Satterlee.
They may already be on the record, but I'm going to make my vote based on the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation. I seconded to hear more discussion. I don't hear anything further that would influence me otherwise. My reason is very, very simple. I believe that the approval of this subdivision would jeopardize the health, safety, and welfare of the people, particularly as it relates to drainage. And I believe there's been adequate testimony tonight to attest to that. And for that reason, I'm going to, in a moment, be voting to uphold the recommendation of our Planning and Zoning Commission.
Additional comments, Councilman Joseph.
And I'm going to have to go with the statement as saying, due to the petition that was provided by the public, and as Randy said before, you know, we represent the people, and we know the great flood have happened here, but they have major concern. The people do. And so my reason for agreeing with the board is because the people with their petition, they do not want.
Thank you. Further comments? Any opposition? Hearing none, the motion is adopted. Item number 16, approval for parish president to sign contract for treatment of wastewater from St. Jude subdivision with Community Utilities of Louisiana. This is in District 2, and I would recommend that we refer this to Utilities Committee. There's some additional work that needs to be done. Motion by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Kluot. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition? Hearing none, that motion carries. Item number 17, approval for parish president to sign contract with Community Utilities of Louisiana for asset purchase of interconnecting equipment for St. Jude Sewer, and I would make that same request. Motion by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Kluot. Refer to Utilities Committee. Any discussion, any opposition? That motion carries. Planning and zoning recommendation. Item number 18, zoning review ID PZ 1331.17-Z for American Homeland LLC located on the west side of South St. Landry Road, approximately 2,000 feet of Holly Hill Drive, to request to amend the Ascension Parish zoning map from conservation to medium intensity residential. I would like to for Mr. Fournier to come up, please. He has some comments on this item.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, not the commission, the council. You have before you a recommendation to approve a zoning matter off of St. Landry Road. I'd like to note that this staff at the time had recommended denial of this project because they felt it was spot zoning. I'm going to put this here. I hope that it shows up. If I can get John to put that on the board. One of the things that we have been asked to do by the Planning Commission or the Zoning Commission when this was up for review is to look at that entire area because of the input of Edenborn going across that meets St. Landry Road. And they would look at, would like us to look, the planning staff, at a complete rezone of that property, coming back down south of St. Landry Road, and as Edenborn Extension crosses that area, and possibly look at a commercial corridor or something along that area so that we can come back to the Planning Commission and the Zoning Commission with a complete rezone of the area, not just the spot rezone that we're doing on this one property. So with that, I'll leave it up to you to kind of ask some questions. I'm here to answer. Right?
Mr. Kluot.
Yes, yeah, sir. Jerome, I mean, that concept has been talked about before you got here.
I know.
Okay, that we our goal was to get some interconnectivity with Edenborn and St. Landry and Ashland.
Correct.
And work that out. And we always felt in the back of our mind that that was going to go be even connecting to Cabela's Parkway.
Right.
At some point, is that all was going to start to look commercial.
Right.
All right, and I mean, I just feel like at this point, this may be one request, but I don't necessarily mean it's. I don't necessarily think it's spot zoning. I think that's the way it's. I think that's the way it's going.
Okay. Duly noted.
Any further questions or comments? I have one comment that I talked to Mr. Fournier earlier today, and that this is just what we're asking here is that this just be postponed until they have time to look at the zoning in that entire area, and before we go and put some residential subdivision in a place that's mostly commercial and
yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've been asked to come back to the September meeting, planning and the zoning commission with a recommendation. So we're planning to do that then. All right.
Thank you. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Let's clarify, is that,
That's to send
is that a motion to,
deferred back to planning and zoning.
okay, so the motion would be to,
Defer.
well, to deny and to defer back to planning and zoning.
I think if you deny it, it kicks it for a period of time.
Not
Does
if
it
the
not?
parish brings it back to rezone it. It would only be the landowner himself couldn't bring it back.
We own 18.
Right.
Okay.
With, staff can bring it back to the zoning commission, but.
That's fine. I mean, you wanted to bring it back, you just didn't want to deny it and kill it just for 6 months or whatever it may be, because it sounds like it's time sensitive.
Okay, so let's make sure we're correct, Councilman Johnson. So the motion is to deny the recommendation of the commission, which was for approval.
Yes.
Yes. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Is there any opposition? Hearing none, that motion is adopted.
Yes, there is an opposition on it.
Oh, opposition.
Yes.
Councilman Turner. You almost didn't beat the gavel, Councilman. A roll call, Madam
Councilman
Secretary.
Joseph.
Motion is to deny the recommendation of the council. Deny the rezoning.
No.
Chairman Dawson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
I just need to make sure the vote is correct. So if I, so no would be in favor of my motion, correct?
We don't have a motion.
The motion is a
So
yes.
you're opposing
Yeah.
his motion.
So, yeah, no,
No.
no,
If you want it to go through, no.
Just say maybe and be over with it.
no.
Councilman Satterley.
I believe it's a yes.
Councilman Dempsey Lambert.
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
Councilman Kluot.
Yes.
Councilman Lawler.
Yes.
Councilwoman Casso.
Yes.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
What's the tally, Madam Secretary?
6-3. 6 yeas, 3 nays.
6, that's enough. Motion is approved. Item number 19. Approval of modification of the Unified Development Land Code related to commercial parking requirements. Zoning Commission recommends approval.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Kluot, second by Councilman Dempsey Lambert to accept the recommendation. Is there any discussion? Is there any opposition? Motion is adopted. Item number 20. Introduction of ordinance, budget amendment number 4 to amend the 2017 budget.
It's an introduction.
It's an introduction.
Introduction.
A motion by Councilman Joseph to introduce, second by Councilman Kluot. Any discussion, any opposition? Ordinance is introduced. Item number 21, introduction of ordinance revision to section 17.409D of the subdivision regulations in the Unified Land Development Code pertaining to the use of surety bond.
Motion introduced.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Lawler. I keep wanting to say Lawler. Second by Councilman Kluot. Any discussion, any opposition? Motion is adopted. Item number 22, introduction of ordinance setting fees to continue family planning at Ascension Parish Health Unit.
Motion introduced.
Second.
And a motion by Councilman Johnson, second by Councilman Joseph. Any discussion, any opposition? Motion's adopted. Did I leave one out?
No, you're on 23.
23.
That's what I need to read, Councilman, I'm going to read the attachment.
Yeah, okay. Number 23, introduction of ordinance to amend Ascension Parish Unified Land Development Code, Appendix 2 Development Code, renewal of overlay, and we have an amendment,
Yes,
Mr. Parrington.
there's an attachment. I'm just going to read the, Councilman Dawson and I met today and wanted to make some changes to the attachment. It would read non-renewal of overlay. In order to address the possibility that no interest in industrial development is overlay, the overlay will need to be renewed by the Ascension Parish Council every 2 years from the date of creation of August 6, 2015. Before the council takes the action to renew, the Ascension Parish Economic Development Corporation may make recommendations to the Ascension Parish Council stating whether the overlay should be renewed or not. Then it would add Section B, this renew shall be effective August 3rd, 2017.
Thank you. So, have a
Accept.
motion by Councilman Joseph, second by Councilman Kluart. This is to adopt the amended introduction. Is that correct?
Yes.
Any discussion? Any opposition? Motion's adopted. Introduced. Item number 24, reading of the ordinance to declare surplus and authorize the sale and/or transfer of miscellaneous movable equipment. Mr. Parrington.
To declare surplus and authorize the sale and transfer of miscellaneous movable equipment, the Parish of Ascension has certain assets that are no longer viable to retain, whereas the assets no longer serve or have any public purpose, whereas the Parish of Ascension desires to declare said assets as surplus, provide for sale and/or transfer same. Whereas be it ordained that the Ascension Parish Council, acting in its capacity as the governing authority, that it hereby declares the listing of the assets attached hereto and made a part hereof as Exhibit A as surplus and authorizes the sale and transfer of the same. In the event any portion of the ordinance is ever held invalid or unconstitutional by any reason or any court of competent jurisdiction over it, such portion shall be deemed separate, distinct, and independent provisions shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of the ordinance. The ordinance had been submitted to a vote. The vote thereon was as follows.
Public hearing.
Public comment.
Mr. Sadler, motion by Mr. Sadler, open public. Second by Councilman Johnson.
Motion closed.
Motion by Councilman Joseph, second by Councilman Satterley. Close. Item number 26, to declare, so we got to,
Move the ordinance?
that's what 26 is moving the ordinance.
Well, you were just, all right. I'm ahead of, you're ahead. I'm jumping the gun a little bit.
To declare surplus and authorize the sale of, transfer of miscellaneous movable equipment. Got a motion by Councilman Johnson to move the ordinance. Second by Councilman Kluart. Any discussion, any opposition? Ordinance is adopted. Item number 27, we have some speakers. They're still here. Okay, first one is Jean Saint Germain.
Good evening, council members, and I do have a PowerPoint. You can pull it up.
John?
Yeah, he has it, is that correct?
It's up.
Oh, sorry.
You can go to the next page. The issues are on the next page. It's just to summarize a little bit of what's going on. There's a zoning violation next door to my home. And it's residential land, and there's a business operating fully and across the entire stretch of the property. It's operating, besides being open when it shouldn't be, it's open nearly 7 days a week through weekends and holidays. There's a couple of hundred buses on site on residential land next door to my home. It's an eyesore. I can see it from all areas of my home, down my driveway, my kitchen window, etc. Running buses cause a noise problem with reverse beeping, engine noises, and there's exhaust fumes. There's a stockpile of non-running buses, which is a safety issue and also an eyesore. It has become a situation where there's drainage problems. On my home, due to the fact that he started to build up the land over time, our property value is being affected. It encourages trespassing by the landowner because there's so much commercial work being done next to my home on this residential land. And the parish government, several members and parish presidents and councilmen of the past have been aware of this issue, and it's gone on with no action taken over many years, and my right to a peaceful life has been lost in a place where I've been for almost 40 years. The timeline on the next page is just to summarize. In August of 2007, the Parish Zoning Department issued a commercial permit for a metal building to be built on residential land to house buses. However, still today, this business is operating fully on the land. He has, in 2009, I started speaking with the zoning members and parish president. There's been damage to my tree line, et cetera. All through the years, I've tried to keep up and notify everyone of everything that's going on. In 2014, he started to build up the land in the back with concrete, making it higher than mine, bringing water onto the property. In 2016, he started to do this next to my home, so I'm getting more water than I've ever had next to my home. I'm still seeking a resolution for the betterment of the whole parish and to protect my land, and that's bringing us here today. I do have some pictures in the packet from over time showing the view from my home in different areas, the tree line, the junk pile. Imagine the noise of this happening a few feet from where you're trying to reside peacefully. I'm showing the time where he was building up the land and a lot of water on the land as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Barry St. Germain.
Council members, thank you. I'll try and pick up basically from where she left off. We understand that this was an accident years ago where the parish accidentally issued a commercial permit on residential land. I understand it was an accident, but you issued a permit for him to build a building, not to run a business. That business has been operating for 10 years. Every morning, Saturdays, I listen to backup alarms, diesel engines running. He backs up to the fence. They actually got him to build part of a fence. Every year he gets the high school students to add about 50 feet of it, so it's nowhere near level. But anyway, backed up to the fence right next to my swimming pool, exhaust fumes, impact wrenches. When he needs to push one of the non-running buses, he comes over on my property with his tractor and then gets behind it and pushes it with the tractor. Lord, the number of times he wanted to fight me in the yard, I could go on and on about how much of a hassle this has been, and it's just time for it to end. I'm asking you to enforce your zoning. It's your zoning ordinances that he is in violation of, and I'm done. We've tried to compromise. We've tried to be good neighbors. You know, I believe the man bought the property. You know, it's his, but you have rules to follow. I have rules to follow. I think everybody, I mean, if this gets out, everybody's going to want to do whatever they want to do on their own property because you just don't enforce it. I don't know what it's going to take. Obviously, y'all do. I could just go on and on about it. It's just been adding and adding. There's hundreds and hundreds of buses, many of them that do not run. The grass in the back is waist high. He bush hogs it maybe 2 or 3 times a year. The front part, he bush hogs way more often. It just happens to be on holidays when I'm out trying to barbecue. He bush hogs on the 4th of July, Memorial Day, Labor Day. My life, as far as peace and quiet, we own 12 acres. I keep it cut like a lawn. I spend a lot of time, effort, money, fuel, equipment to keep this place beautiful. It's already subdivided. Sewers run, powers run, so the day we decide to sell lots, I can sell. Problem is, who wants to live next to a bunch of junk school buses? I got to figure the devaluation of the property is getting immense. As he continues to build, he's built up the back over 1.5 feet. All of it sloped my direction. So all of that rainwater is now, I'm holding water in places I've never held water before. I'm just going to ask you to do the right thing. It's going to require the parish to, I'm not sure what it's going to require. I'm just asking you to do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brett St. Germain.
Yeah, well, Barry's my brother, and I've been there on those holidays where it's more noise than talking to each other's a screaming match sometimes. You almost seem like you're mad at each other, but you're not. You're just trying to communicate because there's a bush hog running in the back. Sometimes in life you run across those guys that think that the rules apply to everybody but them. This is one of those situations. This guy's been repeatedly asked, repeatedly told, hey, you shouldn't have done this. You shouldn't have been issued this. It's time to move. Well, now it's time for you guys to move on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so item number 27, executive session.
Motion to go in executive session.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Joseph, second by Councilman Lawler to go in executive session. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Councilman Joseph.
Yes.
Chairman Dawson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner.
Yes.
Councilman Satterlee.
Sure.
Councilman Dempsey Lambert.
Yes.
Councilman Kluot.
Yes.
Councilman Lawler.
Yes.
Councilwoman Casso.
Yes.
Councilman Todd Lambert.
Absent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
He's good with it.
Councilman Johnson.
Yes.
Executive session. So we need a motion to return from executive session.
Motion.
Motion by Councilman Kluart, second by Councilwoman Casso. Any discussion, any opposition? Motion's adopted. Have Councilman Joseph.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to let administration investigate for the last 5 years of prescribed description in the zoning code on the property.
So let's clarify that we're going to ask the administration to investigate whether there are violations within the last 5 years on this neighboring property that are not prescribed and that we can take an action on. Is that?
Correct.
Is that correct?
Not prescribed, correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So we
That's
have a
my
motion
motion.
by Councilman Joseph.
Second.
We have a second by Councilman Dempsey Lambert. Any discussion? Any opposition? Motion is carried, and that motion said to return those findings to this council by the next meeting in Gonzales. Is that correct?
Yes, the next 30 days.
Correct? Okay. All right, any opposition? Motion's adopted. Item, whatever it is, the final item number.
John's not here.
Motion to adjourn.
We all gotta stay until Todd gets back.